For example. Now quickly answer whether deadlock exists or not. Okay. Second and fourth we have to check. What is second? Hold and wait. Now coming to P1. P1 is holding one instance of R2 and waiting for R1. Consider P2 is holding one instance of resource R2 and waiting for R3. Consider P3 holding one instance of resource R2 and waiting for R3. So all process P1, P2, P3 are waiting as well as holding in parallel. Now coming to fourth condition. What is fourth condition? Circular wait. Starting from R3, going to P2, R2, then P2, then R3. Coming back to the starting position. So cycle exists. Okay, one cycle exists. Another condition. Starting from R1 to P2, then R3, then P3, then R2, then P1, then coming back to R1. Here also another cycle exists. So one cycle is enough for the deadlock to occur. Hold and wait is also there. So surely there exists a deadlock. Okay, now you see and quickly reply deadlock exists or not. So here P1 is holding and waiting, correct? P3 is holding and waiting, correct? What about P2? P2 is only holding, not waiting. What about P4? P4 is only holding, not waiting. So four process two process is hold and wait, two process is not holding. So surely there is no deadlock. Okay, why you have told the deadlock means you have find out one circle here. Okay, R2, P1, R1, P3, and R2. Suddenly you have answered deadlock. So hold and wait condition is not satisfying for all process. But circular wait is there, cycle is there. Now you understand one new concept. For occurring a deadlock, cycle itself not enough. Okay, if there is a cycle, immediately we cannot say there is a deadlock. If there is a circular wait, immediately you cannot say there is a deadlock. So that only I repeated many times. All four conditions occur simultaneously. That means what? In your graph, both hold and wait should be there and the circular wait should be there. Okay, now come on, going back to this diagram. Here, what exists? Okay, all process involved in hold and wait, correct? P1, P2, P3. All three process involved in hold and wait and circular wait is also there. Two cycles are there. One cycle is enough. Anyway, two cycle is there. So surely there is a deadlock. But in this situation, there is no deadlock. And let me explain why there is no deadlock. Now assume P1 is holding and waiting, P3 is also holding and waiting, P2 is only holding, P4 is also only holding. Okay. When P1 will complete its job, if R1 is allocated, then P1 will complete its job. Correct? What is R1? R1 is holding by P3. Okay, so once P3 released, then only it can be used by P1. Okay. But P3 is waiting for R2. That R2 is allocated to P1. So there exits a cycle. So immediately you told there is a deadlock. Okay. Now consider P2. When P2 will complete, P2 is using R1 and it is not waiting for any resource. Correct? P2 is using R1 but not waiting for any resources. So at one stage, definitely P2 will complete its work because it is holding only, not waiting for any resource. That means what? It is printing but not want any more resources. So once printing is completed, it will release the resource. Okay. So once P2 complete its work with Okay, once P2 completes its work with the resource R1, it will release one instance of R1. So this will become free. Once this becomes free, this can be used by process P1. So now arrow will change like this. Okay, now arrow will change like this. Request is allocated. Now P1 is holding R1 and R2. It is not waiting for any resource. P1 is holding R1 and R2, not waiting. So at one stage, P1 will complete its work. Once P1 is completed, this resource also will become free. This resource also will become free. Okay. Now, this resource will be allocated to P3. Now, this arrow will become like this. Allocated to P3, request is granted. Now, P3 is holding R1 and R2, not waiting for any resource. So, P3 also will complete its work. P4 is not waiting. By default, P4 also will complete this work. This is why we are calling it as deadlock. Okay. So, what are the conditions you have to follow? Hold and wait and circular wait. And don't forget, all four conditions must occur simultaneously. Understand? Okay, first condition by default it is true. Third condition by default it is true. You have to check whether hold and wait and circular wait both are there or not. Okay.